He served in the Army Air Corps in England in World War II. Trained as a glider pilot during 1944 and put it all into action in 1945. He crossed the Rhine in Operation Varsity in March 1945. This was a huge operation, and you'll learn something about the numbers as Patrick is talking. He then went on and studied dentistry and medicine. He worked in the fields of surgery, obstetrics and paediatrics. He moved to New Zealand in 1960 and became Surgeon Commander of the Royal New Zealand Navy during the period 1963 to 1969. After that, he came to Western Australia and attended Curtin University, where he achieved a master's degree, and then went into medical research. In 1989, he practiced medicine throughout Western Australia in country areas, mainly as a locum: Derby, Broome, Exmouth, Wyndham, Carnarvon and Kununurra. In 1990, he entered private practice or general practice and retired in 1999. Not a bad line-up for a bloke, is it? Been around. And so it's with a lot of pleasure that I asked Patrick to come forward today, and we'll go through the episodes. In the past, we've had people asking the Speaker of the Day questions to run a sort of question and answer program, and we might use some of that today to move through the amount of information which Patrick is going to cover today.
Before I get onto that, let me just say how privileged I feel to be asked to come to this really rather special group of people, because all of you are flyers and all of you have had many more experience probably than I have in the air. So it's a pleasure to come here and a great honour to be here. And what I'd like to do, because not very long ago I was at a meeting, and out of interest I said to the group, how many of you here have heard of a hawser? No hands went up. How many of you have heard of a hamilcar? No hands went up. How many of you have heard of so-and-so? So I mentioned the three types of gliders that I used to fly, and nobody had heard of them. And I suddenly felt that this seemed a terrible reflection on the fact that we have many young men who have lost their lives as glider pilots and have no real recognition. And I'm quite anxious to really get people to think, grandmothers, sisters, mothers, to be able to say, yes, my son was a glider pilot. And I'd like really to put glider pilots back on the map, as it were, because I feel that they're a group of people who are highly skilled in their job. They'd learned how to fly gliders, they'd learned how to fly tiger moths, and that was our first part of our training. And I think also I would like to say that when you go through this sort of training, it's good for you and it's good for people that they should know about it. And I think that there's so many things that of the past of the Second World War that have been completely ignored, and I think we need to bring them back into perspective. So what I'd like to try and do is to, by showing some of these pictures we have up here, describe what these things are like, how they're constructed, how they're trained, how people are trained, and the result. Well, now this one, which is the
What's that?
Hotspur glider, was first of all built as a means of transporting troops, but it only held eight soldiers. So really it was never used as a training glider. Never used as an operational glider because it only carried so few people, and so it was used as a training glider, and it was one of the first gliders that I flew. And then after that we went on to the Horsa glider, which was the one which was the workhorse, as it were, and they contained about 28 people, and they could also carry a jeep and trailer, and also most of them carried high explosives. So they were the glider that I flew most. Now, the biggest operation I went on, obviously, was the Market Garden, which was the first major glider operation of World War II, and it was really quite a big thing, in as much that we lost a lot of people were killed, and it was also, thank goodness, a very successful operation, in as much that the war actually literally stopped after six weeks after this operation. The Germans got out of the war, and that was the end of the war. So really it was quite an important operation. It was one that lost a lot of lives, and so is very important in the history of the war, and I don't think should be just left unsung or not talked about or recorded. And I think it should be recorded, and I think that all those young people who've lost their sisters, their daughters, their grandmothers have all experienced the sorrow of losing someone, and they should be able to be proud of who they are and what they were, and I would like to see them to made much more public, and I'm hoping that as a result of my talk with Brian and with other people, that we will get it back on the map, so that people will know that glider pilots were actually a part of the war and did a good job. Now, what I will do, just out of interest, let me go through Operation Varsity, which was the major operation. There were about 400 gliders, and they lost about 450 pilots, either injured or killed, and so it was a significant operation in every way, and I think should not be left out. Let me just tell you a little bit about the glider. It was initially, because of the Versailles Treaty, the Germans were not allowed to build airplanes. So what they did, instead of building airplanes, they built gliders, and they built extremely good gliders, and that was the reason they did them, because they weren't allowed to build airplanes, so they built gliders. And Churchill found out from a few experiences that the glider was a very, very useful operational weapon, and so it was used a lot, and so that's how the glider became popular. It was Churchill who actually encouraged it and had them designed. It was difficult when you think about it. Most of the people involved in its construction were people who built the best furniture in Britain. They got them all together, and they got together and built gliders. And it's incredible, but they did a great job. And part of it was, I can recall seeing 4 men carrying a large bit of metal which was very, very heavy, and it needed 4 men to carry it. And this was going to be the protection of the glider pilot, so that if he was being shot at from the ground, he'd have a metal protection. But when they put this thing on the glider, they found it made the glider so heavy that it wasn't even worth doing. But I remember seeing that metal plate which was going to be there. So we actually had no protection from small arms fire. And so, and on my way on this operation, I was actually flying at the time, and my pilot, who was a very good friend of mine called John Darcy Clark, I suddenly saw him slump, and I realized what had happened. Somebody had shot him from the ground, and he had been killed. And since he was a very good friend of mine, I was very upset at the time, but this is what happened. And I actually, I mean, it wasn't difficult. I was there, so I just had to land the glider, and I landed the glider. I went through a ditch, I think, and knocked the wheels off and came to a standstill. And as soon as I'd come to a standstill, I realized we weren't on our own, and we started getting a lot of fire coming from all over the place. And so I realized we were a pretty hot target, so I got the troops out as fast as I could, and so that was really it. And from then on, I became an infantry officer and fought as an infantry officer until the situation was righted. And so that was my brief war. It was brief, but it was significant in as much that it did actually, I hope, shorten the war a little bit. Now, first of all, we were given leave, which was about 2 weeks disembarkation leave, as they called it, and that was so that we could spend time with our families. And also, we were not allowed to leave the airfield because of security reasons, so we weren't allowed to go anywhere excepting stay there where we were. And we did last-minute jobs, and some of them were really quite difficult because we had to return all our personal gear to a hangar, which was used as a storage place for our uniforms and our personal effects. And I think all of us, as we put our uniforms away and our clothing away, all thought, I wonder if we should ever collect this. And it was quite a sobering thought that you didn't know whether you were going to be collecting that gear or somebody else would be collecting it for you. Anyhow, happily, still here. And so the actual work which was carried out on the gliders was quite easy, because they were easy to build, and quite cheap. Airborne divisions were landed, and it was a successful operation in as much that we actually cleared everything. We did actually dig trenches and things like that, because we found that the Germans were much better at digging trenches than the Australians or the British. And so we had German prisoners coming along to actually dig the trenches for us, because they dug a trench which looked like a trench and had nice straight sides and pretty tidy, while the ones that were dug by the British and the Australians was like somebody had been through there with a bulldozer, and didn't give you that feeling of confidence that the German ones did.
Patrick, could I bring you back to the actual flight?
Yes.
Just keeping you on target here, I've been around to see Patrick a number of times, made copious notes. and I've been in on the ground floor on this for some considerable time, and I've made up the slides, so every now and then I'll try and bring it back to the slides and the discussions we've had. But the arrow there indicates the approximate path under tow, and the two destinations were Hemmenkelm and Wessel.
Basel, yeah.
So that's where they were, and they're the two gliders that Patrick is talking about, the Horta and the Hamilcar,
Yes.
and they're at scale. And so while the Hamilcar was a much bigger glider, it carried a lot more internally, it was only a foot or two longer than the Horta.
Yeah. Yeah. The Hamilcar glider, have we got that picture of it where it's the tank coming out of it?
Later on.
Later on,
Yeah.
okay. And so these gliders were really quite functional and were very useful, and they were used to a great extent. So they were a part of the whole operation. And
So you told me that Saturday, the 24th of March 1945, is a day that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
yes,
And it all started at 10:30.
it all started at 10:30. We left, and we took off, and all the gliders were lined up at an angle, and the tow planes were lined up on the other side in a row, and they just came up and picked up the glider, and off we went. That's the way we went off to war, as it were. And so
You were number 73.
we were number 73, and there were two pilots. There was myself and John Darcy Clark. Now, John Darcy Clark was the first pilot, and I was the second pilot, because he had more glider pilot experience than I had. So he was picked as the first pilot, and we carried about 28 troops, or eight. But that was eight. That was on that particular operation. We had 8 there because we were a coup de main party, as we call them, and we were supposed to blow up a bridge, and so we actually had a jeep, a trailer, and high explosive, which is not the best thing to be carrying. And that shows a picture of what it would look like in the glider when you were looking out through the windscreen. And the next picture shows you the operation. Now, that's interesting because there you see how close the pilots were to each other. And so the fact that my friend John Darcy Clark was killed on his way down shows how a movement of the glider a little bit one way or the other could well have meant me instead of John, because we were quite close to each other. And so that was what the glider looked like, and that was inside the glider. And they were not the best things to fly. Most of the people it carried would get sick because it was a pretty bumpy ride, and it was 4.5 hours of flying. And so by the time you arrived there, you were probably quite relieved, actually, hoping you might die. You felt so sick. But it was, we got there anyhow, and we left actually at a place called Fargo, which was a camp there, army camp, and there, I think it shows you, the next one shows you where we went to New John. Is it?
Can I just come in there?
Yeah, do.
John mentioned Camp Fargo, and I couldn't find it on a map. I've got a pretty good atlas at home. Couldn't find it there, so I went on the internet and I found a reference to Camp Fargo. And when I accessed the document, there were 4 parts to a story which had been submitted by a youngish person, maybe in his 40s or 50s, relating the story of his father, who flew a glider out of Camp Fargo on the same day, quite obviously. And one of the descriptions that he gives of an accident was witnessed also by Patrick and their descriptions are very much parallel, so they obviously saw the same accident.
Yeah.
But anyway, I worked out if you departed at 10:30 that it would be around about 1:30 that they arrived at their destination.
And I can recall so well this glider literally falling apart in the air, and I think I said in my description that they fell from the sky like puppets, and they were just all coming out. Because what happened was somebody had started the engine of the jeep that was going to leave the glider from the front entrance, which it'll show you later, and that was how we would have got out when we landed. But somebody started the engine by mistake, and the thing went through the front of the glider where it was supposed to, and of course the whole thing fell apart. So there was this bodies falling from the sky, and they were all our own troops, you know. And so it was a pretty sad sight.
You're telling me that the Allies, the Americans, had put up a smoke screen to obscure your arrival, and that caused more problems for you than them.
Yeah. Well, actually, it wasn't the Americans. It was actually that's right. It was Montgomery. Montgomery had laid down General Montgomery, and he laid down a smoke screen that nobody could see anything at all.
Here the gliders in any museums anymore?
No, I think the only thing that's in the museum is myself and most of them.
That one there is in a museum, and that photo there had initially the interior of the museum there. I painted in the sky and the green stuff.
Yeah, so yeah, there are some models there, and that was at Arnhem, wasn't it? That one, yes.
Yes, I collected these photos from all over, and that would have been either Arnhem or this exercise, Market Garden, Varsity.
Well, Arnhem was before.
Yes.
And didn't that put the fear of God in you, what happened at Arnhem?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't the event at Arnhem put the fear of God into you?
Yes, in fact, I lost a lot of friends at Arnhem, and I lost, in fact, quite a number of my friends. But on the other hand, you know, it's a funny thing, but I remember writing somewhere that once you get into the thing, it's suddenly something as you're doing, and you're doing it because you've decided that was what you were going to do. I thought I was going to be really scared. I wasn't scared. I was just excited. It was an operation I was doing which I thought was useful, and I didn't really feel frightened. I thought I should feel frightened, but I didn't. And so it wasn't that bad really, but it was just that when you added up the whole thing at the end and you suddenly realised how many people you'd actually lost on the operation, that how bad it was, and that. But you know, the actual training as a glider pilot, and that was quite a long training, and we had to do this flying tiger moths, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed flying tiger moths, and I enjoyed that part of it. But you know, there's not a lot about war that's fun really when you work it all out.
Patrick, tell us about the young German digging the trench.
Oh yes, that's right. Yes, this young German, because of the digging ability of our own troops, I decided that the German might be better at doing it. So I asked my sergeant, would he go and get me a German who spoke English. To look at his face, you'd think I'd asked him for a ready cooked Christmas pudding, because you know, as if I could produce a German who spoke English. He did actually. He found one there, and he was a young man. And I looked at him, and he didn't look more than about 17 or 18. He was quite young, and I thought, well, and I noticed that he was trembling. So I thought, I suppose in those circumstances I would have been trembling too. But I think that he was actually very, very frightened. And he said, "Why are you going to kill me?" I said, "But I'm not going to kill you. Why should I want to kill you?" And he said, "Well," he said, "you have your..." I'd actually picked up my pistol, which was a Browning, and I'd been cleaning it. So he saw me cleaning the pistol and putting two and two together and thinking that he was going to be shot. So I put my arm around his shoulder because he was only a young man. I was only a young man too. I was 24 and he was about 17. So I put my arm around his shoulder and gave him a bar of chocolate. I said, "Look, your war is over now. You'll be going home to your family soon." And he was reassured, and I couldn't sit anywhere that was damp without his taking his jacket off and putting it on the ground so I could sit on it. So you can tell how grateful he was for the fact that he hadn't been shot.
A friend for life, you might say.
Yeah, it was quite a sad thing, really. Good, a hand coming up.
So you really did all this training just for one single flight, and when he got down on the ground, then he became a soldier, is that it?
That's right, yes. And the thing is that, you know, it's a lot of training to do, I agree, but on the other hand, when you think about it, that war finished 6 weeks later, and I think that it might have been the fact that it was a successful operation that decided them to finish the war. Whether it did or not, I don't know, but still, let's hope all those lives were not wasted.
Patrick, what aircraft was towing the gliders?
Well, we had several. We had Halifax, we had Dakota, we had Sterlings, all those, and we had quite a good relationship with our towing pilots. We would wear maroon socks because that was what the airborne wore. So we wore maroon socks, and we also changed our button at the top. I had an army one. They had the other button. So it was it was quite a nice sort of relationship between tow pilot and glider pilot.
Patrick, did the gliders only get used once, or they get taken back to the UK for?
No, they didn't get. They normally really. We crash landed them purposely. We actually brought them down and knocked off the undercarriage and the wheels and everything, so that we come to a rapid stop.
So they only did one journey, and the pilots only did one journey.
That's right.
What altitude would you release at?
Probably about 2,000, 3,000 feet. And it was, you know, and the other thing was that we had to get in quickly, because when you come in like that, you don't just sort of come in slowly. You have to come in steeply like that. So the glider has got to have full flap, and there are great big things like barn doors which are on the wings, and those come down, so you've got your flaps on, and that with the flap down you can come in at a very steep angle, so you don't have to sort of be flying around, because you're a very good target at that stage. So you want to get down onto the ground as quickly as you can and out of sight, so you don't linger.
What was your stalling speed? What was your stalling speed?
Stalling speed, 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
Had a fair load on.
Hmm?
Had a fair load.
Fair load, yes. Yeah.
Patrick's glider ended up like that. Not that that's the photo of it, but the glider was burnt.
Patrick, what were those gliders like to control? Were they precise or were they sloppy at ending?
Well, they were pretty sloppy, really, when you compare them with a social glider. But they were effective. I mean, you could certainly one of our braver pilots tried to do tried to do a loop in one.
Did he succeed?
No. No, we did try these things, but they weren't very successful. Because we did a lot of training on them.
How many hours did you do on your tiger moth before they let you breed?
5 hours.
Even though you were crash landing, how much distance did you need to land? Land.
Oh, probably, I would think about 200 or 300 yards, something like that, you could land. Because you literally crashed into the ground. You literally did that purposely. So you literally wrote the glider off. You didn't, you weren't going to leave it for the enemy to use, and B, you wanted to stop as soon as you could to get out because you were a sitting target.
Patrick, how many troops did you carry?
28.
About 28.
The glider could carry 28.
28 soldiers, yeah. But we were carrying a jeep, a trailer, and high explosive with the idea of blowing up a bridge.
Did you blow up the bridge?
No, we didn't. So really, it wasn't a very successful operation, but still. I'm not weighed down by medals.
The description I was mentioning earlier on about a glider disintegrating, the Hamilcar carried a tank, and the tank driver and crew were asked to get into the tank 5 minutes before touchdown. The driver was to start the engine and have the engine warm so that when the glider came to a stop they could drive straight out with a warm engine and make progress. Evidently, the driver started the tank with it in gear and it drove out the front, taking away the front of the aircraft, which then became a drag problem for the pilot who let it go, and down it all came. And Patrick's description of that and the story that I read was so close to the same thing, they must have seen the same accident.
Yeah. I said on it, they felt like puppets out of the sky. That's how I described it in my description. They were just bodies dropping, and you saw the tank come out and everything, and that was it. So it wasn't a very nice sight.
In the story that I read, they said the tank bounced 3 times.
Yes, there were 820 airborne troops killed, 1,795 troops wounded, 580 troops missing in action, 70 glider tugs shot down, and 72 glider pilots killed, and 114 glider pilots wounded. So it was a pretty expensive operation in the way of loss of life. But still, here it is, they thought it was worthwhile. And I suppose, in the long run, if it stopped the war, it was worthwhile.
Did you do any gliding after the war?
Yes, I did, in actual fact. Yes, I did. Because, I mean, this is quite different from, the fact is that with this thing, you literally are there, you get dragged up to this place, somebody hooks you on, and you're off. And that's it, and then you're on your own. So that's what happened. That's how you got dragged into the sky. And once you'd hooked up and gone, that was it. And so, and I think really, if we had realised that it really was quite a sort of suicidal mission. And I think that those people who entered into it, I think, deserved more than they got, because they haven't been mentioned by anyone.
Who released the glider?
That's
the glider pilot.
Glider pilot, yes, yeah.
Patrick, in those 6 weeks after the operation and before Nazi Germany surrendered, were you captured? And if you were, how were you treated?
No, I wasn't captured. don't know what they must have been doing. No, I wasn't captured. I wasn't a prisoner or anything like that. I must have got away and got on with what I was doing.
Is there any communication between yourself and the tug pilot?
Sorry?
Is there any communication between you as the glider pilot?
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Through the rope, there's a communication, so you can actually talk to the pilot.
Right.
And
What did you actually apply to join the services as?
well, I joined the service. First of all, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and they said, "No way, boy. We've got all the pilots we want, you know." So I said, "Well, in that case, then I think I'll become a glider pilot," because that was the nearest thing to flying. So that's how I got into it.
Patrick, were there many occasions where the tug was shot down before it got to the target?
Oh yes.
What would happen then? Did they make safe landings or?
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't. No. You really were very vulnerable.
Because there is a book with his crossing of the Rhine in it. For those who don't know, Austin was a member of this club here, a very competitive pilot. His name appears on that prop there many times, winning glide approaches about all funny things. Yeah. Glider pilot, and he crossed the Rhine, went back to England and volunteered for a second crossing. So maybe he was involved in Operation Varsity as well.
When did you come to live in Australia?
Why did I come to Australia?
Yeah.
You're a glider pilot.
No, I think I came. I should add, by the way, I've had a stroke. That's why I'm a bit forgetful now again. I can't remember things. And that's
Pretty well. Pretty well.
I'll let my doctor know. Thank you.
Patrick, just a comment if I may. I went to a Oshkosh in 1992, and I went to a forum that was somebody, an American tug pilot, a fighter pilot, glider pilot.
Yes.
And it's just amazing how his story was just exactly yours, and the particular thing, again, he wanted to stress was that nobody really, there wasn't any glamour, so therefore it didn't get talked about, and he was trying to do exactly what you have tried to do today, to bring forward those brave guys who did that thing and didn't make it. And it's amazing how similarly you're, maybe it was you, I don't know, but you had an American accent, so it wasn't.
No.
But it was all very, very similar to you.
Patrick, we've got to 2:10. We're
So 10 minutes over
time, yes.
Okay. Well, then I'll say, like we say, thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being such a good audience, and thank you for all your questions. As I say, I'm sorry that I don't remember everything, but we remember a little bit.